Hello and welcome to the origins of America. America, the land of opportunity, the home of freedom, the melting pot of cultures. But have you ever wondered how this great nation came to be? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. So let us take a journey back in time and discover how a group of rebels sparked by ideas of democracy overthrew an empire and created one of the most influential countries in the world. Our story begins in the early 1600s when the first English settlers arrived in Jamestown, a small settlement located in the heart of what would become the state of Virginia. They came seeking a new life and an escape from the rigid social structure and religious persecution of England. But they found themselves struggling to survive in a harsh and unforgiving environment. Their ships had arrived empty, having left England in the middle of winter. And so the colonists were forced to endure hunger, cold, and conflict with the local native tribes. Many didn't survive the brutal conditions, and the colony seemed destined to fail. But against all odds, the settlers persevered. They built simple homes and established a small community. Over time, more and more settlers arrived, drawn by the promise of a better life in the New World, and as the colony grew, so did its wealth and power. The settlers began to raise crops and livestock and trade with the natives. They established small businesses and crafts, and the colony became self-sufficient. The settlers also began to develop their own identity, a unique blend of English culture and American values. They created their own government and developed their own laws and customs. And as the colonies grew, so did their wealth and power. By the mid-1700s, there were 13 colonies stretching along the eastern coast of North America. Each colony had its own unique character. Some, like Massachusetts, were dominated by Puritans seeking religious freedom. Others, like Pennsylvania, were founded by people seeking economic opportunity. Still others, like Georgia, were established as a buffer between the other colonies and the Spanish colonies in Florida. But despite their differences, the colonies had much in common. They were all English colonies, bound together by a shared language, culture, and history. And they were all growing increasingly prosperous, thanks to the vast natural resources of the New World and the hard work of their inhabitants. As the colonies grew, so did their tension with Britain. At first, the relationship between the colonies and Britain had been relatively peaceful. The colonies were allowed to govern themselves and trade freely with other parts of the British Empire. But as the 1700s wore on, things began to change. Britain became increasingly concerned about the growing power of the colonies and began to impose stricter controls over them. They passed laws restricting trade and imposing new taxes, which the colonists saw as a threat to their way of life. The colonists had no representation in Parliament, and so they had no voice in the decisions that were being made. This led to growing resentment and anger among the colonists towards the British government. One of the first major conflicts between the colonies and Britain was over the issue of taxation without representation. Britain had always taxed the colonies, but now they were doing it more heavily, and without the colonists having any say in the matter. This led to protests and boycotts, such as the famous Boston Tea Party, where a group of colonists disguised as Native Americans boarded British ships and dumped tea into the harbor. These acts of defiance showed the colonists' growing willingness to resist British rule. In the years that followed, tensions continued to rise. The British government responded to the colonists' protests with force, sending soldiers to the colonies to keep order and enforce the laws. But the colonists were not intimidated and continued to push back against British rule. In 1776, the situation came to a head when the British government passed a series of laws known as the Intolerable Acts. Designed to punish the colonies for their defiance, these laws included closing the port of Boston until the tea debt was paid, prohibiting town meetings, and allowing British officials to be tried in England rather than in the colonies. The colonists responded to the Intolerable Acts with outrage and organized a Continental Congress to coordinate their response. At the Congress, delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies met to discuss their options. They could try to negotiate with Britain, or they could fight for independence. In the end, they decided to do both. They sent a delegation to Britain to try to negotiate a settlement, while also preparing for war. The delegates argued that since they had no representation in Parliament, they could not be taxed by the British government. They demanded the repeal of the Stamp Act and other acts that they considered unjust. but the British government rejected their demands, and the talks broke down. With negotiations failed, the colonists were left with no choice but to fight. On April 19, 1775, the first battles of the American Revolution were fought in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. The British Army marched to Concord to seize colonial military supplies, but they were met by a force of colonial militiamen. The result was a bloody battle that left several British soldiers and many colonial militiamen dead. The fighting quickly spread to other parts of New England, and before long, the entire region was embroiled in war. Over the next 5 years, the American Revolution raged. The colonists, led by George Washington, fought against the mighty British Army and won. In 1776, the Continental Congress issued the Declaration of Independence, which outlined the reasons for the separation of the colonies from Britain. It was a bold and radical document that changed the course of history. The Declaration asserted the right of the people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and established the principles of self-government and popular sovereignty. The war was long and hard-fought, but ultimately the colonists emerged victorious. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, officially ending the war and recognizing the independence of the United States of America. The newly formed country was vast and rich in natural resources. Stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River and from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, its population was diverse, made up of people from all over the world who were drawn to the promise of freedom and opportunity in the New World. As the country grew, it faced many challenges. The government was unstable, the economy was uncertain, and the threat of war with Britain loomed large. But through it all, the United States endured. The new nation adopted a constitution that established a federal republic with a strong central government and a system of checks and balances among the different branches of government. This system of government was unique and innovative, establishing the United States as a model of democracy for the world. The United States quickly became a major player on the world stage, expanding its territory, promoting trade, and forming alliances with other countries. Its population grew rapidly, fueled by immigration from Europe and the Americas, and its economy boomed, driven by innovation, entrepreneurship, and the vast natural resources of its territory. Today, the United States is a global superpower, a leader in politics, economy, and culture. It is home to some of the world's most iconic cities, landmarks, and institutions. Its citizens enjoy some of the highest standards of living in the world, and its government is a beacon of democracy for the world. The birth of America was a remarkable achievement. A group of colonists, who had been under the thumb of a tyrannical government for years, finally broke free and established their own nation. They created a new form of government based on the principles of democracy and popular sovereignty, which has served as a model for other countries around the world. They established a strong economy and a vast territory that has grown to include some of the most prosperous and innovative states in the Union. And they have maintained a commitment to freedom and opportunity that has made the United States one of the most desirable places in the world to live. So the next time you look up at the stars and see the constellation that represents your country, remember that it was born out of the bravery and determination of a group of ordinary people who dared to dream of a better world. The birth of America is a story that has captured the imagination of people around the world. It is a tale of courage, determination, and the pursuit of freedom. It is a story that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail, and that even the most ordinary of people can achieve extraordinary things. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to subscribe to the Origins of Nation YouTube channel and leave a comment below to share your thoughts on how the United States was born. Don't forget to hit the like button if you learned something new. We've got lots more stories about how nations began coming up. See you in the next episode.